I'm still sold.
Elijah Mitchell crushed.
Yeah. Oh, I know, man. That made Ben and I talked about it. It's just insult to injury.
Literally.
Yeah, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NFL Strategy Show Ownership Edition. This is an important day, an important show, middle of every week, because we're looking at who's going to be chalk, or at least who's projected to be chalk right now. Who are the good pivots? Who are the good fades? Diving into all of that, talking top stacks towards the end of the show as well. Yeah, it's an important one, so we're happy to have you here. I'm Dave Loughran at Loughy_D on Twitter, LOUGHY_D. Hit me up, and while you're at it, follow my man Matt Gajewski at Matt_Gajewski. Been doing this show with me for a while now, and joining us for the second time, and hopefully all season long, assuming, he holds up, Eric Lindquist at Eric Lindquist. Eric, what's going on, man? Ready for week 2 action?
Yeah, week 1 was good. Minus Mostert, rip to you. I'm so sorry about that. I mean, it couldn't have been a whole lot of fun with that. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, yeah, absolutely nothing you can do about that. But feel really good about this week again. Last week was on Corey Davis, Tyler Lockett, Kyler Murray, Hopkins. And those were all guys that we brought up on this show, and that I brought up on the Live Before Lock on Sunday. So hoping to kind of find those same kind of not diamonds in the rough, because now everybody who might have been under-owned is going crazy high-owned, and we're gonna have to make some really strong pivots up against our week 1 stances. Yeah, we are. And Matt, Najee Harris played 100% of snaps in week 1.
Did he?
Jesus.
Did you know that?
I hadn't heard.
No. Yes, 100%. That means every snap.
I'm just kidding. That's been like the talk of the industry, as if like they weren't going to play the dude they spent a first round pick on. But you bring up a good point, like right away. He did not receive a price adjustment. And this is because his box score didn't actually look that good. But with the role he is playing, there are brighter days ahead. And he just projects like unbelievably early in the week ownership. He's going to be extremely owned. But man, like point per dollars across the platforms, this dude is just like breaking projections.
I'm really curious to see what popular lineup builds look like this week, because the mid-range at the running back position in that low 6K range has a lot of really good options with high upside. And more than anything, it's not just that they have a high ceiling. It's the fact that they are legitimate bell cow backs on their respective teams, and they're not priced like it at all. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. First, RIP Norm Macdonald. Eric, loved that guy. Whenever this, not to sound crass, but whenever a celebrity died, I'm kind of like, that sucks. When it came to Norm, man, tears came to my eyes. I've been watching that guy since I was a kid, and we lost a giant in the comedy industry yesterday, Eric.
Yeah, well, I always think of, for whatever reason, and maybe it's just like the age that I am. I'm 33, and the movie that I always saw him in was Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison. So Billy Madison with what day is it today? October, something like that. Just the dumbest stuff that wasn't funny to anybody else. If anybody else had said it, it wouldn't have been funny, but because it was him, the guy was just awesome. And all of hhis Conan appearances that have been going around Twitter.
Classic.
I mean, unbelievable. The one about oral sex and the one I'm talking about?
Doc, she's choking.
Doc, she's choking.
I've seen every clip there is, man. I mean, that was so good.
Fire. Yeah. Absolute fire rip.
Do you know did you know that when he was filming Billy Madison in the pool, they told him to play a drunk guy. So he went out and got hammered, and he kept falling asleep in the pool, and they had to keep shooting the scene over because he was so drunk. God, sucks, classic. Man. I just had to throw that out there. I normally wouldn't do that, but he was a legend, absolute legend. All right, Matt, let's dive straight into this one. And before we do, hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. It only takes a second, and it really helps us in a huge way. We're trying to get to 60K subs as well. We're making a nice push, too. Nice push. We're almost there. If you haven't subscribed yet, but you like this content, and maybe you just haven't gotten around it, you forgot. Perfect opportunity to do it. Help us get there. We appreciate your support and watching these shows, because without you guys, we're not doing this every day, and it's pretty fun to do. All right, Matt, let's kick it off straight away with running backs. And we kind of just talked about it, or at least alluded to it. Najee Harris, after last week, playing, he was on the field for every snap. Not only that, though, it was a tough matchup. Like, it wasn't a good spot for him in terms of just expected production. But all I care about is the opportunity. And you have someone like Harris, you have someone like Carson, who played 75+% of the snaps with Rashad Penny also getting hurt. Now we go into another high total game this week. Just a bunch of those 6K guys standing out. If you want to hit on Elliott too, we can touch on Montgomery, who looked very good against the stout Rams defense, but wasn't involved as a pass catcher. Floor is yours.
Yeah, this is the range I think that's going to make or break a lot of lineups. With Harris being priced where he is, I think just in looking at early builds, I think a lot of people are going to roster Harris, and then they're going to go to the top for one of maybe a McCaffrey or a Kamara. Looks like they're going to be the two most owned. And where you pivot from there is going to be a huge difference maker. There's only 3 really elite backs, so it's kind of hard to pivot directly in that range. One thing you could do is play 2 of the mid-price guys. And there, like you mentioned, there's just a ton of very good options in this range. Somebody I'm going to continue to try to buy low on is down here in this mid-price range, Chris Carson. And it's not like he even really had a poor role to begin with. Seattle just got a lot of touchdowns through the air. Lockett had a big day. DK Metcalf middling there. But this team is playing with a different offensive coordinator. Shane Waldron comes in. They're probably going to be a little more pass heavy, and they're a team that is going to score a lot of points. They're going to run with more tempo this year. This is a game overall I want to highlight, and I'm hoping that Tennessee can give us a little more than what they showed last week against Arizona. But you're still talking a 5-point spread. Seattle the favorite there. Should mean positive game script for Carson. The total is 54 points. It's the second highest on the entire board. So I think you're not only gaining leverage off what I think is going to be the chalky build, Najee plus an expensive back, but I do think you'll get some leverage against Seattle pass catchers as well.
Eric, you win a baseball GPP yesterday?
I did.
Congrats, man. Someone just mentioned it in Slack.
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And be sure to check out Deeper Dive, Live Before Lock. If you're still playing MLB, we still got shows every day, including, I think, just Live Before Lock now, right? But we also have, no, that's not right. On Monday night and Thursday night football games, we only have one, but we have 2 every other day of the week, and the strategy show in the morning with Josh and Adam too as well. So be sure to get there. I'm all over this 6K range. And listen, the field will be too. It isn't to say that they won't be. We'll talk about our pivots. And I think there are a couple really interesting ones down there. And at the top, one of them may be facing the Seattle Seahawks. But where do you stand on the highest owned guys right now in the Harris and the Carsons? Alvin Kamara's up there just because pretty much every week. Last week, not to go crazy here, but last week, his 20 carries was the second highest of his career. So that was interesting to me with Latavius Murray gone. Not to say that you're not going to see you're not going to see him get 20 carries every game, but that was encouraging, even though the game script was really favorable.
Yeah, and the game script was favorable for him getting the highest carry allotment. I mean, they basically were in control of that thing from beginning to end. It was quite a statement game for them in a neutral game environment, something where we were looking on one side of the ball and it was absolutely the other one you needed to be more invested in. I expect Kamara to be more involved in the passing game going forward, so I have no problems there. I wanted to touch base on Chris Carson. I think the big thing that maybe wasn't touched on the front end of that, Rashad Penny was dinged up. He's probably not going to play. It said he's trending towards doubtful. Having no Rashad Penny out there, I mean, even if Chris Carson does fumble it there, I mean, who's the number 2 there? Alex Collins? I'm not worried about Alex Collins dipping into Chris Carson's share there. So, I mean, for me, I think Carson might be the guy that, if you just want to make a heavier stand on him and be lighter on Najee, I mean, that's one way to get different. You're not giving up much. And, if you're going to go up to that top range for running back, where I definitely want to be for tournaments, specifically on that top end, going to McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, both of them under 10%, which is just kind of incredible. That's just kind of the slate that we're given here, where all of this workload is going towards Harris and Carson. The snaps are there. There's no question what their role is going to be going forward here, barring injury. So I think that's going to be what I do, maybe getting to a little bit more Carson on the front end of that.
Yeah, honestly, as far as the number 2 goes, I don't know if it's DJ Dallas or who it is, but I don't think it makes much of a difference, Matt. I mean, the one thing that people continuously overlook, you and I discussed this a lot on the Fantasy Football channel. Check that out, by the way. Subscribe to it if you haven't done so. We still got awesome videos, waiver wire, start, sit, live streams every single week. The thing that's interesting to me is people don't look at Carson as a 3-down back, but I mean, he is. Mm-hmm. Like, he's a legitimate 3-down back, right? He's going to be out there running routes. I think he ran routes on 18 routes. I don't know what percent of dropbacks, but he ran a lot of routes. 16 carries to Rashad Penny's 2. DJ Dallas had 1. Alex Collins didn't even see the field. So, man, to me, this is at least the guy that, while he will be pretty popular, is going to be on the field no matter what.
Yeah, I agree with you. The only thing I'm worried about is that ownership creeping up. He's somebody to watch throughout the week, but for all the reasons you guys mentioned on top of my own, I think he's a fantastic play. I still think there's some interesting pivots in this range. If you want to just drop down and price a little bit below 5K, there's a couple names I kind of have my eye on here. One of them is Devin Singletary. The surprise inactive with Zach Moss caught me by surprise. And nobody really went to Devin Singletary because you didn't know if Burrito was going to mix in there. They're a team that's already extremely pass heavy, but he quietly had a pretty decent role. He's never going to be the touch guy that even someone like Chris Carson is. But you look at Devin Singletary's role, he has 11 carries, he has 5 targets. And then he actually had a red zone attempt when Josh Allen wasn't just taking over those red zone attempts. So Singletary's super cheap. He has a role in the pass game. That's something I think that's worth looking at a really cheap price, which could be another way just to get contrarian off the chalky build. If you drop down in price to someone like Devin Singletary, he's going to give you immense leverage. Just looking at early ownership projections right now, like he's nowhere near the same level as guys like Chris Carson, who right now early projections around 20%, Devin Singletary down at 5%.
Before we get to any more pivots, Eric, I just want to touch on a couple of other guys at this position that are priced in a similar spot. All of them getting, I mean, in all seriousness, Najee Harris is getting a lot of ownership, like more than a quarter of the field. Carson's around 20. Kamara's at 16.7%. Check out our ownership projections if you haven't done so yet. And then you've got like Darrell Henderson, 5,700, 15%. Eckler, 7,300, 13%. We can get there. But what about Zeke at 12%? David Montgomery at 12%. Both of them are in that exact same price tier as both Najee Harris and Chris Carson. Any interest in either of those guys coming in at around half the ownership?
I mean, the Zeke thing just kind of freaks me out. We were talking a little bit about the show. I dead last on PFF in terms of ranking out 52nd of 52 running backs ranked by PFF in week 1, but saw 70 snaps. I mean, a ridiculous quantity. The workload's there for him. Tony Pollard is still not a threat, should be a threat, but he's not a threat. That's a conversation for a different day. Ezekiel Elliott, I think you still have to have, I'm very, very high on this Chargers Cowboys game. I think that should come as no surprise. It is on the top of the board, 55.5 total. It's moved up to, that's 3.5 from opening. I'm just so high on the Chargers on the other side. And then you brought up Eckler here too. I'm just very high for this Chargers team. And a lot of it has to do with this offensive line. Lindsley having an all-pro center kind of coming in there and plugging in right away. They faced the Washington football team. And last season, if you want to talk about a passing game role, whatever it is going forward here, Justin Herbert last season in only 15 games, he didn't play week 1, but 85 hurries for him there. That's the most that he had in the NFL. Anybody else had by 10 on the season. 70 hits tied per second. And then a league high 187 pressures. He only had 2 against the Washington football team in this spot. Austin Eckler with his passing game prominence. I think another week under his belt here to possibly kind of repair whatever's going on with this hamstring issue. He was still out there running. He's going to be an every down back. So I'm very high on Eckler. I want to try to talk myself into some Elliott, but probably going to be focusing more on the passing game role in just a shootout.
Dude, Justin Herbert was under pressure on 12% of dropbacks last week.
It's incredible.
Lowest of any starting quarterback in the entire league against that defensive front.
Rashawn Slater is a beast. How about that?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Although I wonder if he was under pressure more, would Eckler be getting more work? Who knows?
But I'm just saying that it's a revamped Awesome. That only helps everybody's profile going forward. I mean, Matt would know Rashawn Slater didn't play much in 2020. He was Northwestern's guy that basically just created a run game there at Northwestern, and a guy that just kind of stuck out for me at the college level. You rarely see a left tackle that just kind of like sticks out that much to me. But I just love what the Chargers are doing. I think Justin Herbert's going to have forever back there. And I also think that Eckler, it's just going to be a great thing all around for that team.
Matt, do you have any interest in Eli Mitchell at 11%? He got 19 of 20 running back carries after Mostert went down. I would assume that Trey Sermon's active this week, but you and I haven't had a chance to talk about this. What do you make of the fact that Shanahan didn't see Sermon as a top 3 back on the roster before Mostert went down and had Elijah Mitchell and Jermichael Hasty behind Raheem Mostert?
I think there's some noise here. It's been weird with San Francisco, as you all know. There's some rumblings that Trey Sermon's been injured, and that's something we saw in the preseason where he did miss a preseason game because of injury. And at the same time, that 49ers camp was closed the final week. So we don't know if Trey Sermon just didn't perform well. Mitchell outperformed him. I think this is the week where we really figure it out. And because of the uncertainty, I think it's worth taking shots on. Eli Mitchell at his price, still not very owned. And he's in a range that's a little cheaper than some of these mid-price backs. I don't think as many people are going to be diving into that range, which should give you a little bit of an edge. Plus, people just don't know who he is. They might now because he's like the hot waiver wire commodity in seasonal leagues and stuff, but he's still a fairly unproven commodity, a rookie out of Louisiana Lafayette. He's this like big size, speed, athletic back, and still a pretty good game environment overall. We're talking about a 50 total. They're playing Philadelphia, whose front seven is fairly strong, but San Francisco is the favorite. Should mean positive game script. And I think there's a lot of games here that are going to come in slightly under-owned because you have the Dallas Chargers, you have Tennessee, Seattle. But at the same time, like San Francisco, Philly still has a 50-point total that has a real chance of shooting out too. Yeah, it does have a real chance of shooting out. And we saw last week, while it wasn't a shootout, Philly's offense should be able to keep pace with some teams. It comes down to their offensive line. If their offensive line stays healthy, I don't think their defense is good enough to hold up throughout a game against San Francisco. Eric, we can't hit on everybody here, but I do want to touch on some pivots at the running back position. I'll throw one at you first that I find kind of interesting this week, and then see where you're going with these. So there's a couple. First of all, Nick Chubb's at 7% right now. Mm-hmm. I know that his price is kind of in that no man's land because you've got him at 7,800. So it's like, okay, do I just go up to Kamara and Cook or McCaffrey, or I just go down to Najee Harris and Chris Carson, right? So he's definitely in no man's land. I get that. But Nick Chubb is going up against a Houston team where if they ran the ball 40 times, I wouldn't be shocked. They're near 2 touchdown favorites in this one. The biggest thing is Nick Chubb going to get any involvement in the passing game? He caught both of his targets last game. That's cool against Kansas City. 15 for 83, 2 scores. Clear goal line opportunities are going to happen. Could he get 20 attempts? I would like to see what his over or what his prop is for rushing attempts. I probably hit the over if it's anything reasonable. But just your thoughts there if his ownership stays in that like 5 to 7% range because everyone's going up or down.
I get nervous because I think last week was about as good of a game script as he could possibly run into, and he only got 15 carries. I mean, you're looking at a team with Cleveland where, I mean, you got to think when they're ahead in these spots that they're going to be able to go to Chubb and make it work. He got in the box twice. That's why you saw the price increase. And again, this is a fantastic spot going up against Houston. There's no question about it. But I mean, how many can I get him? Can I get 20? What would you set the over under on his number of carries in this spot to be?
20 and a half.
20 and a half. Okay. So then I'm probably going to be a little interested. 7,800 for sure. I mean,
you think that's unreasonable?
No, I think that is reasonable. I'm just shocked that he only had 15 carries when they were up the entire way up against KC. I mean, that's
up 3/4, right?
Yeah, 3/4. But I'm saying that it's a spot where they still should have been feeding Chubb. And, you know, he was the most effective guy on the field, 2 touchdowns. He was only 15 carries, 83 yards. I don't have a problem going there. As you said, not going to get the involvement in the passing game. So for DraftKings scoring specifically, maybe not going to be. It comes down to ownership. You're not giving up that much ownership. I mean, he's really low owned for facing Houston in any spot whatsoever. So I'm going to probably have to think about that one a little bit more. Again, for me, it just kind of concerns me always knowing that you have Kareem Hunt there. He does get the passing game work. Both of them performed really, really well against Kansas City, and Houston is a fantastic spot, no question about it. But now with that price increase, with, you know, how many guys there are in the 6K range. I mean, David Montgomery is a guy that I'm really interested in. Chris Carson, we already talked about. Najee Harris, of course. Like for me, I can save a lot of money and go to, I think about the same amount of productivity and not have the Kareem Hunt worries.
Yeah, I don't even disagree with you. I want to disagree because it's just such a smash spot, Matt. Like in terms of if Nick Chubb had 200 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, you'd kind of just go, all right, yeah, that kind of makes sense on 20 carries. But it's a weird spot, and I don't know if I'm going to get to a lot of them.
Yeah, he's the tournament play for me. And I don't think I'll have a lot of him either just because of roster construction. But you always need to consider him. He's always going under-owned because of the presence of Kareem Hunt, which I think is something you kind of like.
Yeah, and not a ton of pass catching upside. People just generally, you see Derrick Henry a lot of weeks come in way lower owned for that exact same reason. And I don't think it's unwarranted, but it's a fun spot to look at in tournaments. I think another one, Matt, that you could touch on here. Let's break down the Denver backfield. They both, Devonta Williams and Melvin Gordon, played 50% of snaps. Melvin Gordon broke off that 70-yarder late in the game. Was targeted 3 times. They both actually ran a decent amount of passing routes, but we know Teddy Bridgewater probably isn't prone to target his running backs as much as other quarterbacks were. He didn't last year. Well, that's not fair. Yeah, he targeted Mike Davis quite a bit. It was Drew Lock that didn't. My fault. Got that backwards. How do you see this going moving forward, particularly in week 2? Because Devonta Williams is very cheap. Is there any interest there in tournaments?
I think it's a 50-50 timeshare, and it's a nice matchup against Jacksonville. Like, Denver's near touchdown favorites. The game environment's not great overall. It's a 45-point total. The reason you would get to Devonta is strictly because of price. I don't think you're probably playing as much Melvin, even though he's the one that had the good game. But like you mentioned, it's buying low on a guy in a 50-50 timeshare who just didn't have the big game. With that said, I think there's still other players that are pretty affordable down in this range. And we touched on a few of them already. I jumped the gun a little bit on the pivot section, but I do like Devin Singletary as a pivot. He's just 500 more. And then there's some other players in the low 5Ks I think you can look to pretty comfortably. One I want to play is Damien Harris. The fumble worries me because we know how Bill Belichick treats players that turn the ball over. But at the same time, Damien Harris had a massive workload. He had 23 carries. He actually handled 79% of the running back attempts, and they're 6-point favorites over the Jets. I think in tournaments, I'm willing to get to him, and he's not a 1-for-1 pivot off a guy like Javonte, but I think he's cheap enough where you're not sacrificing a ton in price just going up to him.
Yeah. So here's why I'm not worried about the fumble. Normally, Matt, I would be very worried about it. Here's why I'm not worried about it. Ramondre Stevenson had 2 touches and lost a fumble on one of his only 2 touches.
That's right? Not good.
No, well, I'm saying, so like if you're going, all right, let's give Stevenson some more work because Damien Harris fumbled. Well, can't do that because he fumbled and he only touched the ball twice while Damien Harris touched it a lot. I love the Damien Harris spot, Eric. And one of the reasons I like it a lot is because if you were to set the over under on targets for, or receptions, let's say targets for Damien Harris, what would you put it at? Like, maybe 1.5, or you would just put it at 0.5 and juice the over a lot, right? But not 3.
No, I would not make it 3 whatsoever. I mean, you have James White, and this is, he got 7 targets. You bring James White in for passing plays, for passing downs. I mean, James White is a revelatory, otherwitherworldly, once-in-a-lifetime generational talent. Okay, Matt is looking at me like he's great.
Those are the nicest things.
I'm just saying, maybe it's James White week. I'm just trying to talk myself into a dude who got 7 targets. And
one of a kind, generational talent. Here's going to Canton, first ballot Hall of Famer.
I don't know. He looked pretty good in some Super Bowls. I'm just throwing it out there. Well, he's okay at football.
Canonize the man. Go ahead, Matt.
Here's how Damien Harris gets targets. It's not because he's not the clear pass catching back. He's clearly not. But these players come out there and they change plays so often. So Mack Jones sees a front he doesn't like. It's a running play. Damien Harris is on the field. He checks out of it. Damien Harris is going to get more targets than he did under Cam Newton. And it's just like, if you were doing 0.5 as his over under for targets, I would take the over. And it's just because James White's not on the field in those situations. So when they check out our run plays, Damien Harris is going to get some targets. His ceiling is for sure capped, but it's nice that he's the back on the field for a ton of snaps because he's just going to fall into a few targets because of it.
Yeah, right. That's right. But even 3 for a guy that's a bell cow to me is okay.
But all I'm saying is his receiving floor is not 0. Like James White's going to play on 3rd downs, but Damien Harris is going to find a couple targets, like maybe Nick Chubb level targets, because he's going to be playing on rundowns. And when they check out of it, he'll maybe see a couple targets.
Yeah, makes sense. And Eric, nothing bothers me more than people go, you can't. Bill Belichick never has bell cow backs. Bullshit. In 2016, LeGarrette Blount had the 2nd most carries in the entire league. In 2018, Sonny Michel had the 8th most. If there's a decent guy that's capable of being a bell cow back, as we saw in week 1, he's absolutely going to do it. Why? He's not stupid.
Well, and Damien Harris still got 23. There were 30 total rushing attempts, and Damien Harris gets 23 of them. I mean, give me 75% of the carries for a dude. That sounds pretty nifty to me. We're looking for bonuses. We're looking for upside here on DraftKings, and I think the 100 plus the bonus, and then 3 targets last time out, he'll fall into some passing game work here. I have no problem with him. You're also getting a lot of that risk mitigated by a price tag. I mean, he's too cheap. He's too cheap down there. So I have no problem going to him whatsoever. I think kind of mixing him in with some of these other guys. You had brought up Devin Singletary. For me, it just comes down to Chase Edmonds against the Vikings. I mean, the Vikings made Joe Mixon look like God last week. So I think Chase Edmonds going to be a big part of what I do in tournaments as well.
I like it. In week 1, Harris was the only one with a rush inside the red zone.
Yep.
That's good. He had 3 of them. He had 1 inside the 10, Matt. I think that was actually the fumble.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right?
That game wasn't on for me, but it does sound right.
Oh, it was on for me, but no. It was Giants Denver was on for me, but not Chiefs.
You guys are probably watching Red Zone.
I watch Red Zone for sure, but I have the 2 TV set up. So I'll watch one, like the Eagles here, and then the other one, or I'll watch, whatever the late game is. Someone mentioned that the host never mentioned Joe Mixon in chat and then did this emoji. I don't know, Matt. I like that he had 27 carries last week in the overtime victory, and I like that he was good, but it wasn't like wildly efficient. I think the Chicago Bears run defense should probably be sound this year, and Mixon's a lot more expensive than a lot of those low 6K guys. That's the only reason I'm not super high on him.
Yeah, the reason I didn't bring him up is because I thought he would just carry some ownership after what he did last week, and I do think he will. Mixon is fine. I mean, he handled all of the work that the coaches said he would. That was a concern heading in. Giovanni Bernard's been there in the past. Does Mixon actually get a lot of the work? And he certainly did. 4 targets in the pass game. It's a team that threw the ball at one of the lowest rates compared to expectation. I'm not really worried about that. We have a larger sample with his coaching staff throwing above expectation, and they were just having success on the ground. They ended up winning the game. So, I mean, I don't think you can really take too much away from that yet. If it's a trend that continues, I would be concerned. But Mixon's volume, man, he's going to be involved whether they're up or down by the looks of it.
Eric, there is one player who every year just pisses on my face, metaphorically speaking, of course. Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Okay, yeah.
And I say that in case you're unfamiliar with the term. It's not a good thing. It's an insult, right? It's unfortunate series of events. It's not like when someone tells you if it rains on your wedding day, it's a good thing. We all know that's bullshit, right?
Yeah, probably. We'll find out in November.
A bird shits on your shoulder, it's good luck. They just tell you that so it doesn't ruin your day. Mm-hmm. No. Ronald Jones has ruined countless weeks for me. Okay. I mean, many, many weeks Ronald Jones has destroyed for me from a fantasy standpoint, of course. And now we have Bruce Arians. Just as I'm ready to back off entirely, pull the plug, so to speak, Bruce Arians says he's starting and he's ready to go. And he's cheap. And he's facing the Atlanta Falcons, who coughed up a ton of rushing yards to the Eagles and their good offensive line last week. Talk me off the ledge, man.
I'm not going to. I mean, you Bruce Arians, I mean, coaches never lie. And so therefore he is your week 1 starter. He might play 1 snap and come out of the game. You never really know here in this spot. Love seeing that fumble. Love seeing all the problems that we've had with Ronald Jones here in the past. I don't really know what to do with it. He's at least 4,800. He at least got a price dip. So, I mean, it comes down to ownership. Everybody and every running back in a starting situation, whether or not that's true or not, is a good play at a certain level of ownership. Right now, we're pulling 2.2% for Ronald Jones. I will have a lot of Ronald Jones if that holds to be true up against a team in Atlanta that I just think, yeah, they're going to be more of a pass funnel, but this is red zone work. This is a guy that has shown just immense upside in the past year. I don't think it's going to be Leonard Fournette season anytime soon. He's actually more expensive too, which is just hilarious. 7 targets for that game for Leonard Fournette, but I'm there with you. If he's going to be 2%, give me more. If he's going to be 5-6%, that's when we can start having the discussion, but I'm willing to go down with the ship with you.
Yeah, I've been at the bottom of the ocean for a long time already. So, come in, the water's cold.
Yeah, you could win $1 million, not get back to even on this guy. Is basically.
Oh my God, yeah, that's I know, yeah, and I know there are plenty of other people in a similar spot, but Matt, it's not like Leonard Fournette didn't let a ball go off his helmet to turn into an interception last week too. That's why Giovanni Bernard came in for a couple snaps because Arians just threw his hands up.
It's not like Arians sees these guys in practice. So I don't know what he's looking at.
What?
Why are they playing?
So what do you think we get out of Jones?
I think we get a 3-man timeshare. Like the snaps between these guys have been very volatile week over week for a year now. And now you add Giovanni Bernard into the mix, who's going to take a quarter of them. I still don't like it.
All right. So,
but he's under 5. I'm saying out of all of them, give me Ronald Jones under 5K with some kind of, you got to imagine he gets the red zone touches. Like you just have to imagine that, right?
Why? Yes. You just said like, we're trusting Bruce Arians.
No, we're not trusting him, but at least it's mitigated by a price tag. Like he's 4,800. He's cheap and he gets the red zone touches in this spot. And there's a ton of upside against Atlanta.
Here's what I would say. Ronald Jones will either ruin your week because you rostered him, or he will either ruin your week because you thought he was going to ruin your week for rostering him. Right. So there's just no win-win here, but he has had some big games and that's what stands out to me. Like Jones had 400-yard performances last year. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games with 17 plus carries. The upside is there. He's actually not a horrible running back. It's just if you're playing him, you have to be ready to go. Ben said this on a show last week. If you're playing Ronald Jones, you have to be willing to get 2 fantasy points in search of those 25.
Yeah, I just think the 25 points are few and far between, and you actually have alternatives. You have Devonta Williams, 4,400. You have James Conner, 4,400. Move up a little bit. You have Trey Sermon, 4,600. I know what you guys are going to say. Trey Sermon was inactive. He's going to have to play out of necessity here unless he's truly injured. You move up a little bit from there. You get Devin Singletary, Chase Edmonds. I just don't see the need to go that cheap for a player in a 3-way committee with so much uncertainty. In tournaments, of course, it's fine. You guys mentioned the bull case for upside, and it's there. If I just think even in that situation for the upside, there's other players that have it too, that have a better path to getting there. Like Javonte at his price playing Jacksonville. We already talked about him, so I won't belabor it. James Conner for Arizona. He's a guy that saw a ton of carries as well. And they're a team that's favored by 4.5 with a 51-point total. And he's only battling one other player.
You don't think Sermon has a lower likelihood of getting there with Mitchell and Hasty in the backfield and him being
Hasty didn't play.
He had a carry.
Hasty had a touchdown.
That
you guys know what I mean. Like Hasty.
But I'm saying Sermon wasn't active. I know you're saying
Right.
It might be an injury, but like he wasn't even he wasn't even dressed.
Yeah, I get it. But like what I'm saying is Trey Sermon is going to be in some sort of committee because he has to. Shanahan's going to use multiple backs.
Okay.
You think Hasty plays out of Sermon?
Well, I'm saying you're suggesting that he's going to use multiple backs when last week, and I know that you're kind of thrust into it when Mostert goes down, but Elijah Mitchell had 19 of 20 running back carries after Mostert went down. So I know that Shanahan is, and I'm not. Let me be clear. I'm not that high on Mitchell this week for DFS purposes, but I'm also just not assuming that Shanahan's immediately going to go to a 3-man backfield. Why wouldn't he have done it last week after Mostert went down and he gave 19 to 20 carries to Mitchell? So, like, why couldn't Mitchell get 80 or 75% of the running back carries this week too? I guess I'm not following.
Yeah, the working presumption is that Kyle Shanahan uses multiple backs. When we've had injuries in the past, he's always done this. Last week's a special scenario because you don't have as many backs active. When Raheem Mostert goes down on the first play of the game, you don't have those guys active in your backfield. JaMychal Hasty, clearly he's not somebody that the team values at all. The fact that he was active is a little surprising to me. And that's the only hole I think you can poke in this is why was Hasty active over Trey Sermon? And that's an answer I think we're going to find out. But as far as this backfield, I don't see any reason why they would it would be an outlier if they didn't use multiple backs. And I'm not talking about last week because last week they didn't have the guys active. But if they did that moving forward, that would be surprising for Kyle Shanahan, which is kind of the working presumption for me with Trey Sermon.
Okay.
Like, wouldn't you agree? Like, I can't remember.
Not really, no.
Why not?
I'm serious.
I'm somewhere between the middle of you two.
No, but I'm not saying Matt's wrong. Okay. Right. I'm not saying I can't envision a scenario. And sorry, Eric, I'll let you get in here. I'm not saying I don't envision a scenario where Shanahan doesn't go to a 3-man backfield. What I'm saying is, like, when guys have been injured, Jeff Wilson had 20 carries, 22, 16, 17 last year. And that's Jeff Wilson. So it's just,
what did other players have?
What?
What did other players have?
I'd have to look, but that doesn't matter.
It does matter, because if he's using 2 backs, then like maybe they ran 30 times,
right?
Which they've done too,
right? But if they're going to run 30 times, I don't care if Sermon gets 8 of those and Hasty gets 2. If Mitchell gets 20,
that's why I'm saying I like Sermon.
Okay, Eric, what are your thoughts?
Oh God, I mean, I don't even know if I want to get in the middle of this.
Like, I don't even know if we disagree, Loughy.
I honestly think I'm somewhere in the middle. So like, we're basically, for me, it comes down to, if we're playing DFS, we got to be worried about ownership. We got to be worried about what's the projected role and what do other people perceive the projected role to be. And so I think currently what we have, 5K for a 5K Elijah Mitchell. I think double-digit ownership is probably too much for a situation where Trey Sermon, obviously they use some draft capital on him. They don't completely hate him. Maybe he hasn't performed up to stout. Maybe he's dinged up. Whatever the reasons might be, 11% for Elijah Mitchell here, 5K. I can understand the argument you make is that he plays for San Francisco in a run-heavy offense for Shanahan, who's a fantastic coach and is proven to be pretty smart offensively in terms of misdirection, creating opportunity for his running backs. But for me, like, I don't know what that Sermon role is going to look like. I don't know what the Hasty role is going to look like. I'm willing to just take shots as long as the ownership isn't outrageous. And it looks like a double-digit ownership, I'd rather just go elsewhere. If that starts coming down, if other people start having those concerns, sounds great. But Trey Sermon feels like really putting yourself out there on a ledge in this spot. I don't think that that's a guy that I'd be wanting to invest in. And, maybe he's inactive and they view him as a guy who's going to be a starter there. They just don't want to ding him up. They didn't need anything. Like, they could have beaten the Lions in a lot of different ways. I don't want to look too much into week 1 and say this is the way that it is. And that's the trap a lot of people get into from week 1, is that we just make too many assumptions. I don't think Elijah Mitchell is probably going to have 19, 20 carries or a majority of the carries going forward. I would be very surprised by that. But to say Trey Sermon automatically becomes a play is probably going a little too far for me.
So I just looked at this. So it was in the weeks that Jeff Wilson, those 4 weeks that he had the 17 plus carries, he saw 100% of carries, 89% of carries, 50% of carries, and 60% of carries. So
who else was active? I like legitimately just don't know.
I think I got to go back and look, but Hasty, McKinnon, and Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert was in the week where he only saw 50% of carries. Raheem Mostert was also active, and they split. So
then, there's at least some sample of him using a feature back. I think that bodes well.
To be fair, Matt, and to back up your point, because I don't want to just like make up my own stuff. The ones where he saw 190 and 99% were late in the season, and they were not playoff competitors. Yeah,
but at least the sample's there. Right. I still think it's most likely he uses multiple backs. Hasty played a fair amount in the last game. Not a lot. Like, I believe it was 14 snaps, but this is a guy that they didn't use at all. I do think it's telling that he was active over Trey Sermon, but I'm talking about, like, if there's a committee situation, I don't see a huge difference between Jones and Trey Sermon as far as upside.
Can we all agree that we're not that high on the Niners backfield this week, though?
Yes.
I'm also not high on Jones is the point, which is why I made the comparison.
Gotcha. Fair enough. We got to move this one forward here. I think that was pretty good running back talk. Tomorrow, Matt Savoca and I will be back with the matchup show. Stick around for that. It's a journey for sure, but it'll give you everything you're looking for. No doubt about it. And then, Matt, you've got a ton of sports betting content over at the Awesemo Odds channel happening right now as well.
Yeah, the main one that we're working on, me and Ben Raza, we're trying to promote our college football betting podcast, Betting You, which has been a ton of fun so far. That comes out on Wednesdays.
Awesome. Check it out. Subscribe to the channel. And the Survivor picks videos are great too. College football stuff. the Betting You podcast, all of that. If you're into sports betting, check it out. And Matt and I were laughing about this before the show. Oh, you know what? Never mind. This is an unsponsored show. All right. Fair enough. But if you haven't checked out everything we got over at Awesemo, I would definitely do so. And I would go to awesemo.com/join, check out the ownership, the player projections, the top stack tool, which is what we're going to get into shortly, the boom bust tool, and everything else for baseball, basketball coming up again, PGA, NASCAR, esports, MMA, everything. All these tools, the ownership projections created, used by Alex Baker himself, Awesemo, #1 ranked DFS player out there. The man has won a lot of money using these tools, no doubt about it. And I think you'll enjoy them very much so. Great articles. The lineup builder, the Fantasy Cruncher add-on is huge if you're looking to get into that MME life. Whatever it is, check it out. Whether you want to go for an express pass, just cheap, weekly express pass for NFL or everything, or monthly or annual, just make a full-out commitment. I'd consider it an investment. But all of that, we've got you covered. Awesemo.com/join. Whether you're serious, a hobbyist, whether you're a pro, doesn't matter. Check it out. And if you have any questions about what's best for you, you can hit me up on Twitter at Loughy_D. My DMs are mistakenly open. All right, Eric, let's talk wide receivers, man. Diggs, Cooper, Lockett, Kupp, Ridley, Hopkins, Brown, CeeDee Lamb, and Allen Robinson all pulling 10+%. Nobody's pulling away from the pack, though. Pretty flat ownership, even among these guys that are, in the double digits.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, I feel very fortunate because Tyler Lockett ended up being the guy that I was the most invested in at the wide receiver position. Him and Corey Davis kind of splitting between the two of them in almost every major lineup that I had. And I think I got a little bailed out. Only 5 targets. We had 2 bomb touchdowns. Helps to have Russell Wilson as a quarterback is probably my guess. But Stephon Diggs really kind of is the first guy to talk about. 15.2%, tied with Amari Cooper. And I'm in love with that Dallas and Chargers game for sure. And Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, you can make massive arguments for them. 16 targets. I mean, that's just a ridiculous workload. But Diggs, this is going to be another tough spot for him here. I'm curious because I don't know if that ownership is going to be identical to Amari Cooper. I got to think as the week goes on, more people are just going to flood to this Chargers game. And so Stephon Diggs goes from a tough matchup against Pittsburgh to another difficult matchup here, but he's just unquestioned wide receiver 1 there, as opposed to Cooper, who has to split with Lamb, who has to, figure out exactly between those two, which direction you want to go, maybe investing both of them with Dak. But Stephon Diggs still kind of standing out for me as like the guy in cash that I'm absolutely probably going to play.
Talk to me, Matt.
Yeah, I love Diggs. It's a really nice buy low spot for him after Buffalo just disappointed entirely. Not a great game from Josh Allen, but we know this team is going to be super pass heavy. They were down the stretch last year. They're a team that passed at the highest rate above expectation last year as well. They completely abandoned the run in the playoffs. I'm not really concerned about matchups, especially for wide receivers if they're going to draw less ownership. And Diggs is still coming in fairly owned here. And like you mentioned, he is projected to be the most owned receiver, but I wouldn't make too much of that right now because it's so flat at the top between these studs. Like even if you go down to the 5th most owned receiver, it's not even 2% difference between the two. So Diggs isn't coming in with that like egregious ownership that I'm really trying to avoid. But I think if you can make a stand between like Amari and CeeDee, their ownership's pretty flat right now as well. But CeeDee almost the same volume as Amari. If you're going to get any sort of break there, I think playing him could be something you look at. And this is something we haven't talked about much, but like with the Chiefs situation last week, playing Kelsey with Tyreek Hill was something that you wanted to do and won a lot of tournaments. That could be something you look at with Dallas because they're not egregiously priced. You have Amari 68, CeeDee 64. You could play those two conceivably in the same lineup and still feel pretty good about it.
Matt, the Millie Maker winner, which was in that like $1 million+ field, $5 Millie Maker, had Kelsey and Hill without Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I think that's because they were all over 8K. So you run into some opportunity costs.
It was impossible. Yeah.
This isn't that. Like, and then you could also run Cedric Wilson out, who's egregiously cheap, going to run as the number 3. He's just not projected correctly right now for us. He's projected for like less than a point. I assume that'll get corrected and he'll be one of the higher owned cheap plays on the slate because of the game environment, but he's also an avenue to double stack the game.
I'm just curious if either of you guys know what were I could pull it up, but it's going to take too long. Do you know what the yards per target were for CeeDee and Amari, or even air yards? I'm just curious because it feels like they're both going to get equal target share, and we saw that last week. But how much are we looking at guys that one of them just might be able to make more of his receptions?
I have it. So air yards, CeeDee Lamb 159, Amari Cooper 127, pretty close. Targets, Amari Cooper 16, CeeDee Lamb 15. You want ADOT? CeeDee Lamb was 10.6, Amari was 7.9.
Okay.
Slight downfield usage for CeeDee compared to Amari, but it's still pretty close.
Yeah,
it's actually closer than I thought, to be honest with you. So, okay, cool. I like it. Now, I'm always going to look towards a guy like Allen Robinson, Eric, when his price is where it is. Like, I don't think 10, 11% is too much right now. Awful matchup against the Rams. We should have expected a tough spot, yet Dalton still targeted him 11 times. And if that's going to be the case, you come into a matchup against Cincinnati, which should be pretty evenly matched. And you consider the fact that in a brutal spot last week, Robinson still had a 29% target share in good matchups. And we know Dalton, when he will lock on to guys, like look at AJ Green, look at the rapport that they had there. He would target him. He literally targeted AJ Green over 170 times in a season. So give me Allen Robinson as much as I can get. I really like him in this spot.
Well, and also Darnell Mooney, Damiere Byrd. I mean, we saw Goodwin get on the field a little bit here too. The rest of the receiving core around him there's really no tight end threat. Yeah. Cole Kmet.
Cole Kmet was active.
He was good. Yeah, 7 targets was more than I expected there in that spot. But I mean, if you're talking about what are they going to try to do to going forward, like Allen Robinson is what they got. I got to say also, David Montgomery was probably the best player on the field for the Bears.
Fantastic.
He was unbelievable. He had like 82 yards after contact or something ridiculous like that. So I do think they're going to want to run the ball here a little bit, but especially if he looks that way. But Allen Robinson, for sure, 6,200, only received a $100 bump up. Obviously, the Rams matchup, a lot more difficult than this Cincinnati matchup is going to be here. And I definitely am right there with you. I think Allen Robinson, 11 targets still, only converted that into 6 catches, 35 yards. I think he gets a little bit further downfield here. And we're going to see Andy Dalton lock in. I'm pretty excited about Allen Robinson this week, under 12%.
Montgomery, 5.13 yards per contact after attempt.
Stupid.
Granted, he had a 41-yard run, so that's like half of it because there was contact there. But still, he was very, very good. Matt, thoughts on Allen Robinson and anybody else here that might be pulling some ownership?
Yeah, I like Allen Robinson as a pivot. I still think I'm going to try to focus on passing games that are in stronger game environments. That game with the 44.5 totals, just probably not going to get into a lot of my lineups. But there are some pivots, I think, in this range that are in much better game environments. Keenan Allen's one that really stands out to me against Dallas. He's going to give you a little bit of leverage off Amari and CeeDee, who both project to be a little higher owned. And he's still in the A side of this game with the Chargers being favored by a field goal. I think the way I'm going to treat a lot of my receivers this week is focusing on the stacks and the overall stack ownership. Because everything here is so flat, I think you can gain some leverage with some of these double stacks with people trying to make tough decisions between the receivers in their respective offenses. There's a lot of games totaled above 50 points.
So even if you're talking about Allen Robinson and Eric just kind of broke down the rest of that offense, you're talking about Allen Robinson in what should be a spot where he commands a massive target share. You're still worried about, one-off Allen Robinson as just a one-off and not a stack. Because to be clear, I don't think either Eric or myself are particularly enthusiastic about stacking the Bears either.
No, I'm interested in stacking other options. Like even in a one-off situation, is Allen Robinson's target share enough to overcome? And I'll list some guys in his price range in better offenses. Like Keenan Allen's 800 more. Chris Godwin, he's 600 more. CeeDee Lamb's 200 more. Like there's Cooper Kupp is 200 less. There's a lot of options in really good game environments that Allen Robinson has to overcome. And tournaments that makes him a great play if you're going to use him as a one-off or run some sort of like ancillary stack. But I think there's a lot better options that I'm going to try to get to because he's not giving you a ton of leverage. Allen Robinson at 11%, Keenan Allen comes in less owned than that. And the price isn't exactly one for one, but you're not really getting the leverage with a guy like Allen Robinson in a really bad game environment that I think you'd want.
Fair enough. And for the record, I like Keenan Allen a lot too.
Yeah, I like Allen Robinson a ton as a player. If he was coming in like 5% and then some of these receivers were like 20, it'd be fantastic. But he's the same percent owned as like CeeDee.
Eric, did you want to say something on that?
No, I was just going to say Keenan Allen's like my favorite wide receiver play on the week. So I'm definitely not shaming Keenan Allen whatsoever or comparing Allen Robinson to him. But the thing you get is you get savings, and we can't spend up everywhere. Sure, a lot of the running back position is going to be concentrated in that mid-range at that 6K range. So I think builds where you're able to kind of pick out these guys in the mid sixes as well, and then kind of like maybe reverse engineer your lineups a little bit makes some sense. And all the guys that are expensive here, I mean, everybody's going to want to play Hopkins coming off last week. We talked about Diggs, and the ownership is really flat. So I think that there's probably a case where, yeah, I want to target some of the better game environments, but I also want to just target targets. Like I also want to just get the guys that are going to be so concentrated. And I don't see Mooney long-term or Demir Bird or whomever else there for Chicago. I don't see them being any kind of pullaways or guys that are, Darnell Mooney, Demir Bird, Marquise Goodwin. I don't see any of them being guys that are going to pull away from Allen Robinson being the focal point of this offense. So 6,200. I mean, I just think that he makes for a great one-off. Neither of us are looking to play Andy Dalton. That's for sure.
Right. No, my question is, like, he's the same percent owned as CeeDee Lamb. Like, you're not getting any leverage right now. This could change. I'll throw that out there.
I think it will change big time.
Yeah, I agree with you as well.
I think it'll change too. But I mean, again, it's also the question of, hey, CeeDee Lamb is phenomenal and should see a lot of targets, but there's also Amari Cooper. And do we know what's up with Michael Gallup yet?
Yeah, he's out. But the thing is, like, Loughy, you've talked about this a lot. Like a 29% target share for Allen Robinson and a 25% target share for CeeDee Lamb still might mean CeeDee Lamb has more targets.
No doubt. That's really where I was going with this. What I'm saying is I think you could still see relatively equal targets, actual raw targets. But look, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I just think that Allen Robinson, mind you, Allen Robinson has been a top 10 receiver in back-to-back seasons with shit quarterbacking, right? And he's been 150 plus target guy in back-to-back seasons, again, with shit quarterbacking. So he just feels like one of those guys. In cash, I'm always satisfied in a matchup like this playing Allen Robinson because he's going to give you the targets. He's efficient. He's good. And it doesn't matter who's under center. He's going to produce. But let's talk about a couple more here. Then we'll hit tight ends and stacks and be out. So, Matt, let me give you here's a spot that I like a lot, especially if the ownership comes in low here. And I would imagine you guys, we may be on a different page, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. The Vikings passing game to me is super intriguing this week because a lot of people are going to look at Arizona and be like, man, maybe they're not as bad in defense as we thought. Well, Chandler Jones sacked Tannehill 5 times. Okay. Their offensive line graded out second worst in the entire league after the first week, ahead of only the Baltimore Ravens, who could not stop. And we talked about this, who could not stop those edge rushers for Las Vegas. But if the Vikings line holds up, you have a mega concentrated offense between Thielen, who had a huge game, Justin Jefferson, who can also explode, and then even a dirt cheap player in KJ Osborne, who ran a route on 95% of dropbacks and was targeted as much as Justin Jefferson. Game has a 51-point total, could absolutely shoot out. Kirk Cousins can hold his own, and you pretty much know where the ball's going to be going. None of these guys are getting any ownership. So whoever wants to touch on this game on either side, feel free.
You started up.
You mentioned all the positives, and I don't think this is actually a bad spot. Coming into the year, Arizona's widely regarded as having one of the worst secondaries in football. They have Budda Baker, and they don't have any other good players back there. I think it's a really good opportunity to buy low on a passing game. I don't want to say that struggled, but if you look to like Justin Jefferson in particular, he should have had a touchdown. And I think it's a much different conversation if that score counts.
I'm there with you. I think that there's some interesting takeaways. First of all, we were talking about Budda Baker last week, and then all of a sudden Chandler Jones is God. So that was interesting. KJ Osborne, 3,300 here. I'm surprised he's at 1% coming off of 9 targets. I feel like the DFS industry as a whole, we basically just key in on targets and we figure out what the possible opportunity is going to be. 7 catches, 76 yards. Never saw that in a million years coming from KJ Osborne. But as you said, over 95% of snaps here.
I think it was 94, 95%. Yeah.
It's a gigantic number for a guy who's at 3,300. if you're going to be stacking up this entire game, and I'm pretty sure everybody's going to have interest in doing that, especially considering I believe Kyler Murray's going to be, somebody that people are going to be going to. He's under 5% right now, but Hopkins for sure is going to be getting a ton of attention. So if you're going to be running it back, he's a cheap way to do it. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen too. His red zone role is just ridiculous with this Vikings team. It defies all logic and everything I know. People were talking about regression for Adam Thielen, and it doesn't look like it just keeps happening. So just get used to it. It's a thing. There's some rapport there, specifically as they get down into the red zone. But I think that there's some fun ways to be able to stack up that game. And because of some of these other game environments that we have, specifically on the main slate, the Cowboys, Chargers, Tennessee, Seattle, Atlanta, and Tampa Bay, I think is going to garner more ownership. All of those totals over 52. I think that those stacks here for Minnesota might go a little underrepresented for sure.
Any other wide receivers quickly, Matt, that you want to hit on as potential pivots before we work our way to tight ends?
I do think there's some, it's kind of like what Eric mentioned. I think in the games that are coming in with a little bit less ownership, but still have those 50 totals are solid spots to target. So I still like Devonta Smith for Philly, really encouraged by his usage week one. Unlike what we saw in Philly and I guess in Indianapolis in recent seasons with their new head coach, they did not really run a wide receiver rotation. It was mostly Devonta Smith on the field. Saw a really good opportunity share. He's kind of in a no man's land for pricing. So this is strictly tournaments we're talking. But that game still has a 50 total. You just saw San Francisco lose Jason Verrett, one of their starting corners, to a torn ACL. That's the weakness of their defense. If San Francisco and Philly get into a little bit of a track meet, I like Devonta Smith as a strict pivot.
I like it. Low total, but I wouldn't be shocked if Jacoby Myers has a really solid game. Like outside of the actual stat line, everything for Jacoby Myers looked really good last week. He's intriguing to me. Eric, who do you got?
Just to like my lower owned pivot guy down here.
Anybody else you got down there?
Anybody else? Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on Devonta Smith. That's definitely a guy that I would want to have some interest in. Let's talk about Jalen Waddle for a second. I mean, six targets here. This Miami situation is not an offense that I want to be looking at very much, but I know that I definitely want to be targeting Buffalo in just about every single game that they play the entire season. And, Buffalo only 3-point favorite here. Devontae Parker ended up getting 7 targets. It looks like it's pretty spread out here, but so long as you get Will Fuller out there, again, Jalen Waddle is somebody that is still underneath 5K there. He's 4,500, kind of creates a little bit of separation, 2.4% ownership. If I'm playing Diggs and Allen in a lot of stacks, I think Jalen Waddle is kind of the cheaper route to get some of the builds that I want, even over Devontae Parker.
All right. Hey, hit that thumbs up too if you haven't done so. We got 550 people watching right now on a Wednesday morning. So that's a wonderful thing. And we love having you guys with us. Also love when you hit that thumbs up. So, be liberal with your usage of the thumbs up button. Appreciate it. Oh, and subscribe too. Hit that subscribe and head over to the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. We put so much work into that this year and it paid off. I think we provided you guys with a lot of great content. Matt was over there doing stuff. Eric towards the end was over there doing stuff. I've been churning out content all year and will be through the season with all the live streams and all the VODs and all of that great stuff, and the odds channel as well. For those of you that are betting or even looking to get into it as these states begin to legalize it, wet your beaks, get familiar with it, and check it all out. Awesemo odds channel, Awesemo Fantasy Football. Head over there. Tight ends, we're going to just be real quick on this one. Eric, I'll throw it to you first. Darren Waller, 19 targets last game. The guy's a freak, and I stand by this. He was a late second-round pick in redraft leagues, despite being top 7 in PPR formats among all pass catchers, top 10 among all skill players, top 10 in touchdowns, top 4 in targets, top 4 in receptions. Derek Carr loves this guy to the point where he will force it no matter the matchup, no matter who he's facing. It's like it's insane.
You should love this guy. It's freaking he's an absolute animal out there. 7,600. I mean, yeah, we got the price up $100. Whoop-de-doo. It's a tougher spot, obviously, going against Pittsburgh. I don't care. I'm going to have a ton of him. 19 targets, 10 receptions, 105 and a touch. Darren Waller should be a guy that you're high on going forward. And also, we have to talk about him in comparison to the rest of the position. And I mean, it's not really that close. Rob Gronkowski, 8 for 8, 2 touchdowns. I mean, that was probably the surprise of the week at the position for me. Fortunately, that wasn't on the main slate. Unfortunately, Kyle Pitts was. And then George Kittle up there, 6,400. for Pitts and him both getting a little bit of a price increase, for me, that's just not enough to not get away from going to more Darren Waller. He's third in terms of ownership. I would be surprised if that ended up being the case because, I mean, his role is just so secure. Yeah, at the tight end position, people are going to be looking to punt per usual, trying to figure out ways to get to more secure touches at the running back position, more volume in the wide receiver spots. But man, Darren Waller in tournaments, I'm just going to have a ton of him, and I don't see any way around it.
I'm legit petrified of this Pittsburgh defense. I'm not going to lie, but when you play almost 100% of snaps and run a route on 95% of dropbacks as a tight end, like that's pretty appealing, Matt. Although I like Tyler Higbee quite a bit here. He played every snap and not another tight end saw a single target. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think tight end's actually a little deeper this week, and it's mainly because we got some clarity on situations. Higbee's one in particular, especially if they're in a more competitive game environment. I'm not necessarily sure the Colts can give them that, but I think Higbee's role on the field is fantastic. He's playing that role that we saw, I think it was down the stretch in 2019, correct me if I'm wrong, where Higbee just had a monster 4 games when Gerald Everett was hurt.
Five games.
Yeah. Well, Everett's out of the picture now, and Higbee's just taking on that same role.
Right. Well, and that was the hope, right? That was the hope coming into the season for those of us doing, especially like season-long content, that Higbee would be the guy with a better quarterback and there'd be nobody in his way like Gerald Everett was last year. I like it. I'll throw out a kind of lesser owned option, and then we'll all give one of those. I was going to say Ertz because Ertz actually ran almost as many routes as Goddard, and he missed almost a full quarter because he was injured on the sidelines. If I'm ever going to a Philly tight end, just give me the cheapest one at this point. But Jared Cook,
that's the guy.
What's that?
That's the guy. Yeah.
I think it has to be right now, right? I mean, he's cheap. He's facing Dallas. He was targeted 8 times against Washington. He was solid. He was clearly the pass catching tight end out there. I like it a lot. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, 58% of the snaps he played, that was a larger. I didn't know how this Parham situation was going to kind of shake out here, but he's under 4K. He's in the best game environment on the slate, 55.5 total that we keep talking about. Chargers and Cowboys gives you some serious savings to be able to jam in the rest of that game, be able to pay up elsewhere. I mean, if he was priced up, that'd be one thing, but around 5% at the moment, I don't think that he's going to get a bunch of steam coming into Sunday. And Jared Cook under 4K for that kind of a role, 8 targets. I think that it's kind of too good of a spot to be passing up on him. If he had been, not as utilized coming into this week, maybe. Yeah, I feel really good about Jared Cook.
What about you, Matt? Where are we going here in the lower owned tight ends?
Yeah, I think Cook is completely fine. He doubled up Parham on receiving routes, which is positive. They both still played a fair amount, but you're not really paying anything for Cook in the best game environment. So I think in stacks, he's a solid player to throw with Herbert, and maybe even as a run back if you're doing a Dallas stack. I like Cole Kmet for the same reason. A bad game environment overall, but another guy that just played more than we thought he would. He has a very clear role with Chicago. It's probably not a game I'm stacking. I'm not sure I'm going to get a ton of Kmet overall, but he's somebody that I think has a role and is not priced appropriately. I think a direct pivot off Higbee and maybe Jared Cook is Noah Fant, who's coming in a little lower owned than I thought. This is mainly because Fant already had a role in the receiving game, and now you just remove Jerry Jeudy from that. Potentially more targets for him.
I like it. Closing it out with a little bit of top stack talk here. Our top stack tool over at Awesemo is fantastic. It has top stack probability, quarterback ownership, which is, giving you an idea of how popular that stack is going to be, the value, and of course the leverage score on all of those. It's a super valuable tool. If you guys already are subs there and you weren't familiar with it, check it out in the NFL dropdown. And if you're not, you can go to awesemo.com/join, check out all of the subscription offers or opportunities that we have. Highest owned quarterbacks right now. So projected highest owned stacks, and this will change throughout the week. It's still early. We still got 5 days to go. Tampa, Buffalo, Chargers, Dallas, Seattle at 11, 10, 8, 8, and 6. And then top stack probability is Buffalo at 14%. Not like we don't have the Chiefs this week. Tampa Bay at 12.9, Arizona at 10, and Seattle at 8.3. Matt, go first. What are you doing with the top owned stacks? You can hit on that quickly. And are there any stacks that might look contrarian to you that stand out as great options this week?
Yeah, I actually think Buffalo is going to be a little more contrarian than they should be. It's not super contrarian overall, but Josh Allen had like maybe the worst game for what he actually was given as far as opportunity. Like he led the league last week in designed rush attempts, not scrambles, like designed rush attempts, which is pretty crazy. And he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not going to break out those kind of runs. But he's a guy that you can clearly stack with Diggs. Game environment is middling. It's 48.5 in the total. So it's kind of a step below the 50-point totals you have on the field. But that's a chance that maybe you gain some leverage if it comes in super low owned. I like the leverage there, and it's borne out in our top stacks probability. One I like for a little bit lower on this top stacks tool is Philly, which is way down there. Mm-hmm. And that's something you can look to against San Francisco in a game that does have a 50 total. We talked about Devonta Smith. Hurts has the rushing upside. And San Francisco losing some DBs to injury. It's going to be really low owned. That's what I will say about it. But I do like some of the pricing and upside there.
I have some interest. I already talked about Minnesota. If Kirk Cousins really is 1% or even close, yeah, I'll jump on that for sure and just go into concentrated offense. Cleveland is interesting, but the problem is, who do you really want to go to there other than Jarvis? Schwartz, or Kareem Hunt? Maybe they throttle them early and they open it up, but I'd probably stay away from that too. In Arizona, I think that ownership comes up. But Eric, close us out. One of your favorite contrarian stacks midway through the week.
Oh my God. So, I mean, I have one really, really, really off the board and it doesn't feel good. I absolutely love on the top end, just to throw it out there, the Chargers, of course, all the reasons we went to them. Philadelphia, I'm already high on too. We saw Smith and Rager have the roles that I thought that they would, and I feel pretty good about stacking Hurts with them. Oh, this feels bad even throwing this out there. I might get fired after this, but New England.
I already said it. You're not going to. If you get fired, I get fired. I already said it.
Oh, okay. Mack Jones. So we're going to be throwing him together with some Nelson Aguilar, Jacoby Myers. I think it's very concentrated at what we're looking at there. I mean, Hunter Henry only had 3 targets. Jonnu Smith, 5 targets there. I'm not really too worried about it, but running it back with Corey Davis as well. I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking at doing. Corey Davis, 5,300, not enough of a price bump. His role is so secure there. The 7 targets, 97 yards, 2 touchdowns. I'm so high on this dude. I was last week. I put my neck out there for him. I'm going to basically have a lot of Mack Jones with those two running it back with Corey Davis. And I think even with a 42.5 total, which is just so low, I think there's going to be enough passing volume there that it could be viable.
I like it. And let's close it out with a super chat from Austin Bedsall. He says, if I become an Awesemo premium member, is there a good section for cash game players? And what section is it? Well, Matt, I think one interesting thing about that is like ownership will dictate cash. Like, even though ownership, people use it for tournaments, you can very much still use all of the tools with a different interpretation, right? The context is still there. You're just looking at it from a different angle through a different lens.
Yeah, I think like there's really easy ways to get a pretty good sense of what to run in cash. Take the projections, run them through Fantasy Cruncher, see what the optimals are, and you're going to be in a really good spot for cash. Look at ownership. That's going to help you there too. It doesn't take a ton much else.
No. And by the way, what he means by that is if you're running it through an optimizer, just unadulterated, just put the projections in, whatever the optimal top lineup is. Oftentimes that's what like people use.
You're probably gonna win most of your head-to-heads just doing that.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Now you'd want to get the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, and I promise I'm not trying to upsell you. But what Matt's talking about, you would need that for it. But
like my cash process is that, and then I like just go through and make sure there's nothing egregious.
Right. But even Eric, even if you don't have Fantasy Cruncher, you can still use all of these tools for cash purposes, just knowing how to view them.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing how to view it, being able to just sort by some of the ownership projections, seeing who the highest owned players are going to be. I mean, it should tell you Najee Harris, good direction to go. Chris Carson. I mean, it's just so easy to be able to sort that into Fantasy Cruncher and kind of piecing the plays together, because I think the optimal right now is Ezekiel Elliott in it. I don't think that that's going to be something that I perchance want to do. I'm not sure yet. I don't want to talk about my cash lineup on Wednesday that's going to be coming for Sunday, but I do know that it's very easy to sort by the ownership, and it's the best tool that you're going to have to be able to easily put together a profitable lineup week in, week out. And
even the boom bust tool, just using that to gauge high floor and ceiling too, all of that stuff, right? Low bust probability. All of that stuff plays into your cash game. And hey, listen, if you guys have questions in your subs, hit us up. We're happy to answer them. We have the premium office hours in Slack chat too, where you've got the pros from Awesemo answering your questions all the time. to help you better and further along your game. So that's a kind of unheralded feature of the subscription that we offer at Awesemo, and it comes with all of them. Use that, take advantage of it, and learn from guys who have won a ton of money doing this. So I know I have. Anyway, that'll do it for us. Follow Matt at Matt_Gajewski, Eric at Eric Lindquist. Hit up your boy Tyler in chat before you go. Say thanks, Tyler. Appreciate you for producing this show. Follow me at Loughy_D, and we'll catch you back here for the next one. Peace.